Chapter 7. I assumed we'd get cracking on our plan straight away, but in our excitement we'd forgotten it was the weekend, and that meant fewer trains, closed post offices and our parents at home an annoying amount of the time. We could do very little before Monday, which was hugely frustrating. You're all right, Lil, Mum kept asking all Friday night. Fine, but I was pretty useless at keeping secrets, and by Saturday morning I felt twitchier than ever. I'd also realised the flaw in our plan. Tulip and Oz were returning the jar to a tomb they didn't actually know the whereabouts of. I was pretty sure by now that it didn't come from Mr. Carter's dig. Returning it there to break the curse would be pointless. We'd be taking it from one archaeologist's hands and putting it straight into another's. The evidence pointed to it being somewhere in the Luxor area, but where exactly? What we needed was the rest of Professor Hanawati's translation, which hopefully might tell us where Kiki was buried. I was already keen to read more about Lysandra and Maya and what happened to poor Kiki in the end. The more I thought about it, the more pressing it became to get hold of the translation. The trouble was, it was very likely to be inside Professor Hanawati's house. It's not exactly stealing, Tulip reassured me a few hours later as we crossed the park in the middle of Russell Square. More like collecting what he meant to send to your granddad. Directly after breakfast, I made excuses about needing a library book, then gone straight to Tulip and Oz's house. Luckily, Tulip had that morning received her pocket money, which covered our bus fares to Russell Square. Professor Hanawati's house was just around the corner. But we've still got to get inside the building, I reminded her. Knock on the door, Oz said, like we'd overlooked something obvious. And say what exactly? Because I knew I'd get completely tongue-tied. I could pretend to be a relative, Tulip mused, though I'll be surprised if there's anyone at home. In which case, can't I just crawl in through a window? I said, which felt far more straightforward to me. In broad daylight, in central London? Tulip looked horrified. Do you want to go to prison? I got the shrinking feeling that I'd not thought this one through. At the edge of the park, we stopped. It was yet another bitterly cold, grey November day, and it made me wonder vaguely if feast days to the sun actually worked and whether we should try it sometime. We huddled together for warmth, at least Tulip and I did. Oz stood apart, hands deep in his pockets. Which house is his? Tulip asked, scanning the rows of tall buildings surrounding us on all sides. It's down that side street. I pointed to a turning on the right. Professor Hanawati's address had been on the letter he'd sent Grandad. Number 10. It was obvious which house it was. A policeman had been stationed outside. Our chances of getting inside, already slim, now seemed about as likely as a heatwave in December. It wouldn't have occurred to me in a million years to approach the policeman, but Tulip was quite composed. Let's see what we can find out from him. Are you sure? I asked wearily. Lil, she said, trust me. I glanced at Oz, who did a half-funny shrug. All right. We headed down the side street. The policeman, when he saw us coming, rocked back on his heels. Straight away, Tulip took charge. Can you help us, please? We're supposed to be visiting. Rummaging in her coat pocket, she pulled out a crumpled bit of paper. I was close enough to see it was a receipt from a bookshop, but bold as brass, she pretended to read out an address. My uncle lives there. I'm in the right street, aren't I? He's expecting you, I chipped in. Number 10, your uncle? The policeman rubbed his chin. I worried she'd gone a bit too far, but the policeman, taking in Tulip's dark complexion, was clearly of the opinion that if two people had brown skin, then they must be related. In short, he believed her. "This might be a shock to you," the policeman said, "but I'm afraid your uncle has passed away." "Oh, my goodness!" Tulip wiped her eyes. There might even have been real tears in them. She's also cunning. She also cunningly kept moving closer to the house's front steps. "Is my aunt at home? She'd never forgive us if we didn't pay our respects." But the policeman was getting suspicious. "The house is under investigation. You can't go in," he replied, beckoning us away from the door. "So I'm afraid you'd best hop it, kiddies." "He'd never let you inside," Oz told Tulip once we were safely out of earshot. "He probably hasn't even got a key." "You still could have backed me up," she said crossly. "Thanks for trying anyway," I told her. But we weren't any closer to getting our hands on the translation. I was feeling cold and rather fed up. At this rate, we'd have to wait until after dark to sneak into the house, and by then our parents would be wondering where we were. I was mulling over all of this when a coal merchant's horse and cart swung out into the street. It had come from an alleyway alongside the last house in the row. If, as I was thinking it was a tradesman's entrance, the alley would run along the back of the whole terrace. It gave me an idea, which I quickly explained to the others. "You're mad," Tulip said, though she didn't try and talk me out of it, which I took to be a good sign. When the policeman was looking the other way, we ducked down the alley. True enough, it ran along the back of the houses. The plan was for Tulip and Oz to stay near the entrance and keep watch. "Don't be long," Tulip whispered. I'd once heard it said that thieves will spend hours watching a house they plan to rob, but we didn't have that luxury. "I'll time you," Oz said, looking at his watch. 10 minutes. Go!" I set off, aiming for the third house in the row. What I hoped to find was a little larder window left open or a cellar door unlocked. I was nervous and was sure it looked obvious to everyone that I was up to no good. Almost immediately, a servant girl came out of the first house to throw potato peelings in a bin. She glared at me, hands on hips. "You better not be one of them newspaper reporters sniffing around here again." She must have had terrible eyesight to mistake me for a grown-up. "I've lost my dog." It was the first thing that I could think of. "Hey, that's what they all say," she sneered, but thankfully went back inside. By the time I got to the right house, I was sweating. I'd visions of the Hanawati's maid chasing after me with a broom, or their cook threatening me with a rolling pin. But the back of the place was completely shut up and silent. There were no lights on inside, no smoke coming from the chimneys. Steps led to the basements, so with a quick glance over my shoulder, I went down them and found the door at the bottom locked. Somewhere out in the lane, I heard another door slam and voices, a girl's and a man's, coming from the opposite end to where Tulip and Oz were keeping watch. "She's down there somewhere, poking about," the girl said. I recognised her voice and groaned. It was the short-sighted servant again. "You did the right thing coming to find me. Now leave this in the hands of the law," the man assured her. I gulped. The law? Drat and blast it. The stupid girl had gone and fetched the policeman from around the front. Flustered, I tried the basement door again. It was still locked. No amount of rattling and pushing would change it. Nor was there any time to run. Already I could see the top of the policeman's helmet as he approached the house next door. Desperately I tried to think of an excuse for being here. The dog one obviously hadn't worked. When I saw the coal chute door, all thinking stopped. It was at head height next to the basement entrance and metal. And more importantly, when I lifted the latch, it was just about big enough. This was my way in. With a great heave and a kick, I scrambled through the opening. The hatch swung shut behind me. The policeman must have thought I'd vanished into thin air. The chute part was short. I slid down it chin first and hit the ground with a whomp. It was pretty dark down here and stank of damp and coal, though thankfully the floor was a soil one and soft, so I wasn't hurt. I scrambled to my feet. The door from the coal store led out onto a brick passage. Down one end was the kitchen. The only sound coming from it was that of a dripping tap. At the other end was a staircase that I guessed led to the ground floor. I sprang up the stairs. Though I couldn't feel my heart beating strongly, I wasn't scared anymore. I'd done the hard bit. I'd got inside. All I had to do now was find the translation and crawl back up the coal chute. In the hallway, I hesitated. Where to look first? In his letter to Grandad, the professor had mentioned a study and working at a desk. The study was the first room I came to, though finding it wasn't down to luck. What got my attention was a terrible smell. On opening the door, the smell got 10 times worse, so bad in fact that I had to cover my mouth with my hand. It was worse than a meat locker in summer, worse than our outdoor lav when the drains blocked up. It was so bad I couldn't put a name to it. The room itself felt strange too, the air prickly, as if someone had been in here only seconds ago. For the first time since coming into the house, I began to feel ill at ease. Though the shutters were closed at the windows, there was enough light to see by. Everything looked black and grey. At the centre of the room was a desk, smaller than Grandad's and definitely tidier. A blotter, a stack of notebooks and a letter rack were all lined up neatly down one side. A jacket had been slung across the chair, like someone had just taken it off. It made me suddenly sad, that jacket. I tried very hard not to look at it, instead keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of Professor Hanawati's distinctive royal blue writing paper. A couple of steps to the left and I realised I'd trodden in something horrid. In the gloom I couldn't see what, but the soles of my shoes were sticking to it. Lifting my feet made a slurpy wet sound, and the smell of it was possible, if possible, got worse. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, only that it filled the whole room and made my stomach heave. Quickly now I searched the professor's desk. There were no letters. The notebooks were mostly empty. The translation wasn't there either. I just hoped he hadn't hidden it somewhere unlikely. I didn't think my guts could stand this smell much longer. Next I searched the bookshelves, shook out books, felt between them, nothing. Then on a side table I noticed a photograph in a silver frame. In the picture were two men, one I didn't recognise, with a dark, proud face, and the other one I did. It was Grandad. The photograph was taken in the desert, Egypt, I guessed, and though the jar wasn't in the shot, like any visible force, you could sense the damage was already at work. Professor Hanawati, for that was who the other man was, I was certain, looked angrily at the camera. Grandad stared at the ground. It was a shock to see them both as young, unhappy men, but it was nothing compared to what I saw next. When I'd first come into the room, the desk had blocked it out. Now the hearthrug lay before me in all its gruesome glory. There was something on it, something dark and grey that looked like cinders from the fire. The once pretty carpet was now completely blackened, yet the armchair right next to it hadn't even been scorched. Come to think of it, the ashes weren't like ones from a fire. They were darker, heavier, with a smell like bad meat. I felt clammy and sicker than ever, because I'd read the newspaper report, so I knew exactly what I was looking at. The article had described the hearthrug in horrid detail. This was the very room, the very spot where Professor Hanawati had burned to death. Someone had tried to clear away the mess. The one small mercy was that the feet had gone, but my brain still couldn't cope with what I was seeing. I didn't know if I was going to be sick or faint. I couldn't stay in this room any longer. As I turned to go, at the very last moment, I spotted from the corner of my eye a piece of bright blue paper sticking out from under the armchair. I hesitated. It was right next to the ashes. Holding my breath, I ducked down, grabbed it quick, and it was paper, more than one piece, with the title, Lysandra, and completely untouched by the fire. I've never been so glad to see anything in my life. Stuffing it down my coat, and before I breathed another breath, I ran for the door. Lysandra. A feast day dawns with a clear blue sky. Kiki has chosen his favourite horses for the chariot race. Lion, a young chestnut, and Myrrh, whose black coat ripples like water. Sensing excitement in the air, they refuse to keep still as I try to plait their tails. Rotty, the stable boy, admires my handiwork. I bet my finest blanket on those horses winning. Most of the wagers were on the king himself. Rotty tells me. The palace courtyard under the fig tree crowds are gathering to place their bets. A medicine woman is offering to pull out bad teeth for free. There are bottles of sandalwood, heeled shoes, puppies, a song to charm snakes. The queen has bet her finest earrings, so loaded with rubies they make the wearer's earlobes stretch. The sun is shining, the air is warm. A moon is smiling down on us again. It is a day for being happy, I tell myself, yet does little to calm my nerves. The race is scheduled for midday afternoon. A crowd lines the route which runs from the palace through the marketplace down to the river before looping back past the temple with its newly built ram-headed sphinxes. It's turned into a hot day. Mother and I are wearing white tunics and coal under our eyes to beat the glare. We take our spot outside the palace gates where the race will start and end. Maya could win, Mother says proudly but under her breath. The king always wins, I reminded her. When the two chariots appear, it's not hard to see why. Maya looks almost too big for his vehicle. All arms and legs, he's struggling to keep his balance. His horses, Bess and Beetle, have grazed too much winter grass on the riverbanks and are plump next to Kiki's pair. Kiki, in contrast, is regal. He too has coal painted thickly on his eyelids. He's wearing a gold headdress and a breastplate bright with jewels. His horses, I think smugly, are exquisite. They're snorting, shaking their manes, pouring the dust. In this rare moment, when he truly looks like a pharaoh, Kiki's the obvious winner. On the palace steps, Horemheb, the army general, starts the race. Behind him, seated, is A. Kiki glances at his godfather as his godfather raises his hand. "Wish me luck," that little wave says. A nods, then looks away. It makes me sad for Kiki, whose devotion to his godfather is never quite returned. All eyes are on Horemheb now as he holds aloft a bronze gong. Excitement shimmers through the crowd. As he thumps the instrument, it booms. There's a fraction of excitement, a moment when neither Kiki nor Maya moves. Then the creak of wood, reins snapping against horses' necks, and dust everywhere as the chariots surge forwards. A terrific roar goes up from the crowd. Mother grips my arm, I grip hers. We stand locked together. As the dust clears, we see the back of Kiki's chariot speeding down the street. Despite the bumps and holes, it's going steadily. Maya is some way behind. He's shouting at his horses, at Kiki to slow down. The crowd laughs. They're loving it. When the chariots are out of sight, the crowd goes after them. A great wave of people jostling, necks craning, blood buzzing. "Keep up, Mother!" I hold out my hand to her. She laughs as she stumbles, then catches hold of me again. In the marketplace, the stalls have been pushed aside. The road is wide, dipping gently down to the river. Up ahead, blocking the route, is a heap of rubble. Not so long ago, it was a statue to the old god Aten. Now it's a hazard. Kiki throws all his weight to one side. The chariot swerves just in time to avoid it. Maya, lumbering behind, does the same move. His weight is greater. I cry out as his chariot tips. One wheel leaves the ground, then magically it is righted again. I think I've squeezed all the blood from Mother's hand. By the time the chariots reach the river, we've lost sight of them. Mother and I and most of the crowd walk back to the palace where the race will finish. Every now and then we hear a distant cheer, a groan. It's frustrating not to see what's happening. At first, people are impatient, standing on tiptoe, but as time passes, the crowd settles again. In the middle of the street, doves peck the dirt. A hungry dog who's been watching them lies down and goes to sleep. I start to worry. It can't take this long to gallop around our town. Something must have gone wrong. I go over Kiki's dream again, the darkness, the wild animals, and feel that same coldness in my veins. Mother nudges me. "Look!" On the palace steps, Horemheb is pointing in the direction of the temple. "They return!" he bellows. "Everyone stand back!" Eager to catch first sight of them, we press to the side of the road. I can hear hoofbeats now. I'm excited again, on tiptoe, straining to see. In the distance, I hear rumbling chariot wheels. There's dust in the air, coming towards us like a sandstorm. Shouts, the smell of sweating horses. The doves fly up in panic. The dog awakes and sculls off into the crowd. The road is empty, then it isn't. It's Mayor I see first. He's crouched forwards against, almost touching Bess and Beetle's rumps. Kiki isn't far behind. Soon he's level with Mayor again. By the time they reach us, they're at full gallop. All I see is a blur of speed. Brown horses, brown chariots, brown dust. The finish line is just ahead. Up in the palace, on the palace steps, Horemheb gets ready to bang his gong. The dust clears enough to see Kiki edge ahead. Mayor's horses are tiring. He makes a show of urging them on, but the race is over. The king's going to win. We all laugh with delight. There's cheering and clapping. Then comes an almighty crash, the sound of splintering wood, a stunned silence because all know this isn't meant to happen. People start screaming. The whole crowd pushes and heaves in different directions. "Is someone hurt?" Mother cries. I'm almost too terrified to look. There's a chariot on its side in the road. 2 horses are struggling to get up. When I realise they're not Bess and Beetle, I sob with relief. But if it's not Maya, then it must be Kiki. "No, Lysandra, stay back," Mother pleads. I squirm free of her grasp, reaching for the broken chariot just as Maya does. Kiki has been thrown from the vehicle. He lies some distance away, face down in the dust. People are crowding around him now, unsure of what to do or whether to move him. No order comes from the palace steps. A hasn't got up from his seat. Horemheb is at his shoulder, talking angrily to him. It's Maya who gives the orders. "Take him inside," he says to the strongest looking people in the crowd. "Be careful of his head and leg." As Kiki is lifted up, the injuries are clear. His leg is at an odd angle. There's a gash on his head. but his eyes are opening. He's alive. Sinking my knees to thank the gods, I see the chariot wheel lying in the dust. I wonder why no one else has noticed it. 2 spokes are broken. The whole thing is buckled beyond repair. I was there this morning when Rotti checked everything, then checked it all again. He wouldn't have missed damage like this. He wouldn't put the king's life at risk. No, he wouldn't. I think my gaze resting on the palace steps, but there are those who would. If the pharaoh dies, A is the next living male heir. This, I think bitterly, means Kiki is worth more to his ambitious godfather dead than alive. The healing ladies spend the next day tending to Kiki. From our house we see pots and baskets carried in, fresh incense, linens, herbs and potions. The more I think about how the right wheel sheared off, the more certain I am it was deliberate. A, keen to place the blame, has already found his target. Poor Rotti was dragged from the stables last night and beaten with his own horsewhip. Mayer brings us news as we're closing the shutters against the midday sun. He confirms my thoughts. Kiki's head wound is deep, to the bone. They've bound up his leg in case it's fractured. He's very lucky. He could have been killed. Mayer's one of the few allowed to be at Kiki's bedside. It's not nearly as much fun as hurling pomegranates or hunting ostrich, but he shows equal devotion to it. He's blessed to have such a friend, I say. He's asking for you, Lysandra. Mama stares. I'm suddenly chilled. I'm certain he wants to talk more about his dream. Kiki's bedchamber is in the coolest part of the palace. It catches the breeze from the river and facing northeast, it gets only the earliest rays of the sun. Kiki is awake. His eyes are night dark from the medicines he's been taking, though I'm not sure if it's helping much. He's fidgety and irritable. Leave us, he tells the healing ladies who crouch at the edge of the room. Kiki doesn't speak again until he's very sure we're alone, and even then he lowers his voice. I wonder who he thinks might be out there eavesdropping. It's not hard to guess. Lysandra, the conversation we had about my dream, Kiki says. You haven't told anyone, have you? Just Mayer, I reply, who probably knew about it before I did. Good. I don't want people to think me weak. Weak? I'm startled. So is Mayer when I catch his eye. There's no taint in dream reading. It's a tradition as old as the hills. Kiki interrupts. A window into the afterlife, yes, I know what it means, but everyone assumes I'm dying. He told me the door in your dreams was closed, I reminded him. You're not ready for that journey yet. Ah, but I came close to it yesterday, didn't I? There are parts of his dream that concern me, yes. He is in danger from something or someone. Perhaps yesterday wasn't an accident after all, I confess. Kiki frowns. The stable boy was slack in his work, so I heard. It wasn't his fault, I argue. He checked your chariot before the race, and there was nothing wrong. Someone else must have tampered with it. I glanced at Mayer, hoping he'll agree, but he's pacing the room, as alert as a snake. He stops in front of one of the windows, gestures for us to be quiet. I hold my breath as he listens at the shutters, then flings them open in one swift movement. We all hear the patter of feet as whoever it was out there listening runs away. Kiki's right, Mayer says. No more talk of dreams. We don't talk of the accident again either. By the time the moon's waned, Kiki's hobbling around the palace as if nothing happened. He's cut himself a new walking stick to mark the occasion. Word is he's also trying to show more interest in the running of the kingdom. I wonder what A and Heremheb make of this change. One night, in the orange glow of Mama's cooking fire, Maya takes me aside to tell me the new arrangement isn't going well. They don't listen to him, he confesses. All the decisions still come from A or Horemheb. When they can't agree, they bribe Kiki for his support. But you're there at these meetings. Can't you speak up for him? I ask. I won't be there anymore. From tomorrow I've been ordered out into the desert to find a site for Kiki's tomb. This worries me. Is he sick again? Mayer shakes his head. He's healing well, but A says we should have started work on it years ago. It takes time and sweat to build a tomb fit for a pharaoh. That is true. Kiki's mother and father, beloved grandmother, all have lavish golden chambers hewn from the desert floor. Their journeys onward to the next life will have been comfortable, easy. Mayer's right to want the same luxuries for Kiki. Yet I can't shake off the fact that A is behind this. The wayward chariot wheel, ears pressed to window shutters, the building of a grave. Nothing is what it seems. After a few days of searching, Mayer finds the perfect site for the tomb. He comes home at sundown, exhausted but thrilled. What's it like, the spot you've picked? I ask. I'll take you, he says to my surprise. Mother insists I wear sandals because of scorpions or snakes. I don't like anything on my feet, but for this it's a small price to pay. Since Kiki's dreams, I've been weary of anything with a poisonous bite. Beyond the city wall, the desert stretches in all directions. We go west, heading towards a place where river waters used to run. Nowadays, it's a dry valley, the sides of which are almost sheer rock. I know the spot well. It's only a short walk from Thebes. It was where people of power and prestige are taken after death to begin their journey to the world beyond. Mayer walks with huge, raking strides. I keep asking him to slow down. We slither down a path already worn into the hillside by the men working with Mayer. Which way? I ask when we reach the point where the valley divides. East, Mayer replies. I'm surprised. West-facing graves are more favoured because they catch the setting sun. After a steep climb, the tomb site comes into view. It's a few hundred feet up the cliff face, set back from the edge. Ropes and baskets and other signs of work litter the ground below. Already they've made good progress. I can see steps cut from the rock. The view out over the valley is magnificent. I'm proud of my thoughtful brother. This is a beautiful place to be at rest. My brother is smiling, though shaking his head as though I've not quite understood. It's only the beginning, he says. If my measurements are correct, then the real beauty will come from the sun.